The secondary market for luxury watches is a treasure trove for collectors, but requires savvy navigation. For buyers, research is key. Understand the watch's history. Verify authenticity through reputable dealers. Inspect its condition, and don't shy away from negotiation. Sellers, know your watch's value through professional appraisals. Choose the right platform, be it an auction house or online marketplace, and provide transparency with detailed descriptions and images. But beware of pitfalls. Counterfeit products lurk, and market fluctuations can affect prices. Legal considerations, especially in international dealings, must not be overlooked. Whether buying or selling, the secondary market offers a rich world of horology. With caution and strategy, it's a journey filled with discovery and opportunity. Ariel, the recent news has been pretty crazy, I think, in the watch area. I mean, I watched a video of possibly fraudulent watches from a collector. I saw that there was like a Ponzi scheme among salespeople, and like
fraud where there's money. What a surprise!
Yeah. So, how does one protect themselves? Like, what do you do?
I would say that most of the time, if you are going to be victimized in the watch space, you know it. That watch price was too good to be true. That didn't seem like the best place to buy a timepiece. I'm not sure if you can trust that individual. If you know what you're doing, it's pretty easy to stay out of trouble. There is a large number of very reputable places to buy watches. If people try to take shortcuts, maybe get greedy, thinking they're finding some type of treasure, I'm not sure if an online posting is going to be where you get that anymore. If you want the best deals out there, it's going to be in person. You're going to meet with someone, you're going to develop a relationship with them, and you're going to be able to get the best deals. Online, what you should be looking for are signs of assuredness. It's an authorized dealer. It's from the brand. The vast majority of the time, you're not going to be sort of screwed over that way. It's when you start to be a bit more risky that those risks can come up. So I'd like to hear what other people say, but I think it's actually quite easy to avoid those issues if you if you just go to reputable places.
For many years, I was an authorized Rolex after sales service, countless years really, and a specialist in early vintage Rolex timepieces. And I can tell you what people don't see, because most people are going to be examining only the outside of the timepiece, especially a Rolex where you cannot see through the back to the movement. That, yeah, you can see if your little bezel cover is an aftermarket or if your crown is an aftermarket. But when I pop the inside of Rolexes and other brands, I'm just not singling out Rolex for any apparent reason, except for it's the most bootleg watch in the history of where we walk. The parts, when someone can't have a Rolex parts account as a watchmaker, and that is very hard to secure nowadays, but you need specialized equipment from Rolex. You need to have graduated from appropriate schools, such as WOSTEP, like I did in Switzerland. And then you have to go on for years of training and apprenticeships. And then you have to have clean rooms separate from your dirty rooms, like I have here. The certain waterproofing machines that are $10,000 each are still not good enough. So where's a watchmaker going to go when he needs to make money? He's going to go and find bootleg parts. And the bootleg parts are so damn good. When I open up that watch, that sometimes I can't even tell until I actually take the whole movement apart, get the movement, and then pick it up. And I only know because I've held the real part so many times in my hand. So inside the watch, it's very hard for someone that's not a watchmaker to know what's really inside. And if you're buying it from what's supposed to be a reputable dealer, and still going to give you a warranty, because those parts work. They work just fine. They might not last as long. And some of the parts, I know many years ago, they busted the guys making the parts in Italy. They're ex-Rolex guys that used to make the real parts in Switzerland. So they're damn good. Not bracelet parts, not crystals. I'm talking about wheels, gears, pinions, jewels, barrels, everything inside the watch. Every single part of every single movement is bootlegged. And it's bootleg, damn good. There's crappy versions too, but there's very good ones. That's what you really have to watch out for, because if you purchase that watch and something goes wrong and you send it in to an authorized Rolex or to Rolex themselves, they will not repair your watch unless every single one of those parts is removed and replaced with official, real Rolex parts. And it's going to be a very large bill.
And they'll charge you a lot for that.
They charge you a lot. It's the only way for them to make sure that when you get that watch back, you don't get the usual comment from someone who wears a Rolex. Oh, Rolex is always running 35 seconds slow or 35 seconds fastest. Piece of shit. There's better watches out there. It ain't the watch, buddy. It's the parts and the watchmaker. Okay, they're kick-ass watches, and as well as Omegas. Listen, there's bootleg parts for all the big brands and the most sold watches, because that's where the money is, at the watchmaking bench. Okay, in repairs. So be wary, be careful, and make sure it's a reputable place, like Ariel said, that you can get it taken care of correctly.
Yeah, I faced this problem recently because, like I said, I bought my OP at the dealer, but my Explorer I bought online, and I did have to do research because I was scared about replicas. Because I found out they're so good. They are really, really good. In fact, at this point, I think the counterfeiters are now replicating the Rolex movements inside, and I think a watchmaker could still be able to tell the difference, but it's getting harder and harder. I talked to my local watchmaker here, and he told me that people bring fake Rolexes to him. And I said, aren't they embarrassed? He said, no, they just give it to me. I fix it. And you know what he said? He said, other than the movement, those watches are actually really high quality, and so that raises all kinds of questions. I mean, some people joke about the counterfeiters can make a great watch, almost as good as a Rolex for $1,000. What is Rolex doing, charging us $20K for a watch? As an economist, I like to take a kind of a longer historical perspective about this, because when you look into the history of Swiss watchmaking, you realize that they actually got their start making counterfeit watches, especially in the late 1600s, early 1700s. They made counterfeit English pocket watches, which they distributed through anonymous dealers. There was some research done by Dr. Struthers on the history that's really fascinating. And they also started selling to the US market because American railroad watches were in high demand. And it got so bad that Congress had to pass a law saying, you have to stamp the watch with the country of origin. And the Swiss watchmakers had to actually kind of hide Swiss made in their watches in an attempt to fool people to thinking that those are American made. So this whole counterfeiting thing has had a long history. It's been going back, I guess, at least 300 years, and it's a real problem, but it's also a kind of an economic cyclical thing, as new watchmakers get started in a particular country, their industry gets started. A lot of them really basically, they are producing fakes or homage. An homage watch, is a big issue in watch collecting, because there's lots of ethical considerations. How much originality do you need to say, that's a new design? And I see the same thing happening with the Chinese right now. They started with counterfeit. Now they're moving into homage watches, and now they're trying to go up market with, quote, more original design. So it's kind of fascinating as an economist to see this cycle go through on the Swiss industry and then being repeated by the Chinese. We may have a time where, 50 years from now, the Chinese are going to be complaining about counterfeits to their watches, So, I mean, I'm fascinated to watch, to see all this develop.
I want to comment here because I've also thought about this. I mean, plenty of times I've seen an amazing fake and thought to myself, if only this group just had their own brand, this would be great. They're making a super good watch for like $300. This is amazing. But you have to ask yourself, the economy within which this comes about is in response to market demand. They see this market wants this thing, which is very expensive. If we make a lower price version of that, will get sales. And that's essentially the strategy. It's not too much more complicated than that. They don't bring the type of creativity necessary for the branding. The actual creation of the brand itself and all that goes within that is sort of out of the bounds of what they want to do. And I think that this large industrial base designed to create fakes would not exist if it were for the demand for the originals. So it's sort of a parasitic element on top of this other thing. You take the Rolexes away, they wouldn't know what to do with themselves. The companies that are making the fakes, they wouldn't just make their own brand. They'd be like, what else in the market is popular that we can make a lower price version of? And as others have said, this has been an issue ever since the beginning of the formal watch industry. You look at Breguet watches, for example, and they had all these sophisticated techniques to make sure that the different parts matched up, that you weren't taking a movement and you putting in a different case. They wanted to make sure, and they had a secret way of doing all that. So it's always been a cat and mouse game for a long time. But the irony is that these copycats only put so much effort in as to make something that looks like something else at a lower price. The ability to add the creativity and the artistic element doesn't exist. Maybe in the future that will all change. Maybe the regions of the world where those fakes are made will be culturally different, and creativity and artistry are going to be a bigger part of what goes on there. That's all entirely possible. But right now, I don't think you can separate those parts and say, the fake guys, they're going to be awesome. We're going to figure out something else to do with them. If it wasn't for the Rolex demand out there, they would decide something else to do.
Yeah, and also the counterfeiters are not paying R&D costs. That's part of the reasons why their prices can be lower. So they are free riders, and free riding obviously is a huge economic problem. So let's see how things shake out.
Well, how I started is there's two parts to the story. One is it's no longer a $50 cheap Rolex. That's not what I was speaking about. I was speaking about people who are purchasing genuine pre-owned Rolexes and brands such as, who are spending a good amount of money and expecting what's inside is true. And these aren't the same people who are making these cheap watches. These are people who are making quality products for watchmakers, because most watchmakers, you can't just call up Rolex and say, I graduated from this watchmaking school. I would like to open a Rolex store in my neighborhood. It doesn't happen. There's many roadblocks, and you need, $500,000 won't even get you close to machines and buildings and safe and clean rooms and various inspections where they just happen to pop in at any given time and shut you down if you manage to get parts. So perhaps their grandfather or their father was a watchmaker, and that's how he made most of his money, because let's face it, Rolex is the most sold timepiece, so it's the most repaired watch. It's a timepiece. So if he can't get parts, he's got two things to do: find a new career or find bootleg parts. So be careful and be wary, because those bootleg parts they're almost as good, if not as good, as the originals. Because again, after 20 years is all that the Rolex has to give you parts for. I don't know if anyone knew that. The Swiss law is 20 years. So if you buy a used watch that's older than 20 years, they don't have to supply you with a part. They can tell you, go take a walk. So that is, the patent's gone. So it is legal to make those parts. But what you have inside when you're purchasing the watch cannot go back to Rolex to be repaired. To be worried. So at least if you're spending $4,000 on a used Rolex and it's going to cost you $3,200 at Rolex to get it repaired, that's what I'm talking. Be careful.
Yeah, and I think it's also a supply chain problem, because we know that other than the Holy Trinity and Rolex, the mid-tier Swiss brands are sourcing their components from China or Southeast Asia, and that's part of the reasons why they're getting so good at creating counterfeit parts and watches, is because the whole concept of Swiss made has changed a lot. Before, in the traditional day, they had this system where they sourced all their parts and labor from local suppliers, right, in Switzerland. But now with modern supply chains, I think it's becoming very difficult to protect your intellectual property.
Because and here we go back to where independence in the times you're speaking about, those were the independent watchmakers in Switzerland, with the specialities of one guy just specialized in making pinions, and he was damn good at it. But now we have CNC, we have Swiss mills, We have lasers. We have EDM, which is wire cutting spark erosion machines. It's cut with a very thin wire. It's thinner than one hair on your head, and that's doing the cutting. Okay, so someone who has those machines now can reverse engineer parts that are being made in Switzerland, because the wheels and pinions are not being made like they used to be on gear cutting machines, Shaolin lathes like I have here. They're not. They're being made a lot skinnier, and they're being made in mass production on those type of machines, as I just let you guys know about.
Thank you. We're going to hit segment 5 and bring it home.